It's 5 a.m. somewhere right now. In an apartment in a city still dark and quiet, a person gets out of bed. Not because of the alarm, they turned it off 2 minutes early, already awake, ahead of the day. The room remains dark, and they move through it with a clear sense of purpose, knowing exactly what they're doing and why. No scrolling, no hesitation, no bargaining with the mattress for 5 more minutes. They are up. And the day, which will be challenging in the ways that all truly ambitious days are, has already begun to favor them. Elsewhere, around the same time, another person is also awake, not by choice, but because of a disruption. The phone, snatched from the nightstand in that half-sleep reflex that has become as automatic as breathing, is already delivering the day's first inputs: the email, the news, the notification. The message that arrived at midnight has been waiting. The world has entered the room before this person has had a single moment to enter it. The day begins reactively, driven by what arrived overnight and shaped by other people's agendas before this person has had a single deliberate thought about their own. Same hour, two vastly different mornings, two very different people, not because of talent or circumstance, but because of practice. Because of the specific, daily, totally learnable discipline of what happens in the hours before the world makes its first demand. Research on high performance shows a consistent finding across industries, disciplines, cultures, and history. The most consistently excellent performers, those who sustain extraordinary output over long periods, maintain clarity and judgment under pressure, build lasting things, and lead in ways that genuinely inspire others, almost universally own their mornings. Not in the sense of filling them with more activity than others, but in the sense of using the pre-dawn hours to systematically and deliberately cultivate the specific mental, physical, and emotional states from which all their other work derives its quality. They build mental armor, not metaphorical armor, the real neurological, psychological, and physiological preparation that separates someone who is shaken by difficulty from someone who faces it confidently. The first can work just as hard, the second operates from a completely different inner strength. The armor is built in the morning, during the specific blocks of the pre-8 a.m. routine we plan to create today. Block by block, layer by layer, starting tomorrow. The morning is not the start of the day. It is the foundation laid by the person who will live through the day. The difference between someone who enters the morning intentionally using the pre-8 a.m. hours to cultivate the mental and physical states needed for high performance and someone who enters the morning reactively, handing the first hour over to the inbox, algorithms, and others' agendas is not primarily about the hours available. It's about the quality of consciousness that meets the day's first true challenge. One faces it armored, the other faces it exposed. Today, we build the armor. Why pre-8 a.m. is different: the science behind the morning advantage. Before building the routine, we need to understand why the pre-8 a.m. window is qualitatively different from any other hour of the day, why the practices we develop here produce effects that the same practices at noon cannot replicate. This understanding transforms the routine from a discipline maintained by willpower into a practice protected by genuine comprehension of its value. The benefit of cortisol. In the 90 minutes after waking, the human body experiences a neurological event called the cortisol awakening response, a sharp, natural spike in cortisol that peaks within the first half hour after waking. This isn't stress cortisol, it's activation cortisol, the neurological equivalent of the body running its daily systems check and priming every major cognitive and physical system for optimal function. In this context, cortisol is not the villain it is portrayed as in the chronic stress literature. At its natural morning peak, it boosts memory consolidation, sharpens focus, increases brain glucose availability, and primes the immune system. In the most direct physiological sense, it is a performance enhancer. The body provides freely every morning, yet most people immediately suppress it with blue light from their phone screens, which signals the brain that the alerting phase is over and the relaxation phase can begin, cutting the cortisol advantage short before it has been fully utilized. The pre-8 a.m. routine that safeguards this window, which preserves the cortisol awakening response by avoiding early screen exposure that diminishes it is naturally active during the brain's daily peak. Every practice done during this period occurs when the brain is neurologically primed in ways that won't be available again until tomorrow morning. The pre-decision clarity window. The second neurological feature of the early morning that makes it irreplaceable is the unique mental clarity available before the day's decision-making begins. Every decision consumes a small but measurable share of the prefrontal cortex's executive resources, the neural foundation of judgment, self-control, and deliberate choices. These resources are limited. They decline throughout the day in a phenomenon researchers call decision fatigue, the gradual decline in decision quality caused by the accumulating weight of choices made throughout the day, which diminishes the brain's ability for careful deliberation. The pre-8 a.m. brain hasn't made any decisions yet. Its mental resources are at full strength. The clarity during these early hours, the quality of thinking, the precision in setting intentions, and the accuracy of self-evaluation is the sharpest it will be all day. The person who uses this clarity for the most important mental tasks, such as planning, reflection, deep creative work, or intentionally setting the day's goals, is making the most of the brain's daily potential for work that truly matters. The ownership threshold. There is a third reason, less neurological and more psychological, that the pre-8 a.m. window feels different. It is the only part of the day the world has not yet claimed. Every hour after 8 a.m. is contested territory shaped by the demands of work, family, emails, urgency, expectations, and obligations. For the person who claims them, the pre-8 a.m. hours are truly sovereign. They belong to the individual who wakes into them before the outside demands begin. This sovereignty has a specific, measurable psychological effect. The felt sense of agency, of being the author of the day rather than its subject established in the pre-8 a.m. hours, carries forward into everything that follows. The person who has already accomplished something meaningful before the world has made a single demand moves through the day's demands with a fundamentally different interior stance, not arrogant, not indifferent to the demands, but grounded in the prior evidence of their own capacity and discipline that the morning has already provided. The armor is in place before the first arrow is fired. The 7 steps of the pre-8 a.m. routine. The routine that follows is divided into 7 blocks. Each block serves a specific neurological and psychological purpose. The blocks can be adjusted in duration, shortened on busy days, or expanded when there is more time without losing their essential role in the overall structure. The only element that must remain unchanged is the order of the blocks. They are arranged like a good workout, starting with activation, progressing to challenge, then recovery, and finally preparation, forming a specific sequence designed to achieve a particular outcome. Follow the sequence, adjust the duration, the armor will hold. Block 1 Activation, waking the body before the mind. The first block begins before any words are spoken, before any screen is touched, and before any decision is made. It starts with the body specifically, with the physical activation of the body through one of 3 practices selected and committed to in advance. So the morning doesn't start with deciding what to do, cold water on the face and neck, 60 seconds of vigorous movement, or the controlled breathing technique that physiologists call physiological sighing. The physiological sigh is the most effective of the 3 for this purpose. A double inhale through the nose, the first breath fills the lungs, followed by a brief second inhale to maximize lung inflation. Then a slow, long exhale through the mouth. Repeat this 3 to 5 times. This pattern, identified by Stanford researchers as the most effective real-time nervous system regulation technique, causes a measurable shift in autonomic state within 30 to 60 seconds. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowers cortisol in the stress register while keeping it in the activation register, and fully engages the prefrontal cortex, essentially neurologically activating the brain's optimal capacity at the start of the day before anything else competes for attention. Why does the first block start with the body rather than the mind? The body is the vehicle for the mind, and a vehicle whose engine hasn't been started cannot be steered. The cognitive practices that follow, such as journaling, reading, and planning, are carried out by a brain inside a body. The quality of the body's activation affects the brain's readiness. The first 10 minutes of the mental armor routine are a physical preparation for the psychological work that follows. One rule strictly governs this block: no phone. Not for music, not for a timer, not for a quick check. Use a physical alarm clock to wake. Analog devices handle any timing needs. The phone remains face down, ideally in another room, until at least block 5. The first rule of the Pre-8 a.m. routine is to build the morning before the world intrudes. The phone is the world. It enters when you're ready. The first 10 minutes of the day are crucial. They mark the moment when the default, the scroll, the reactive response, the algorithm-driven morning most people experience is either embraced or rejected. The person who gets their feet on the floor and chooses to activate their own body rather than succumb to the phone's stimulation has made the day's most important decision before most people have even made any decisions. That daily choice, repeated over time, builds character. Eventually, character becomes automatic. The armor begins to form. Block 2. The thermal shock voluntary discomfort as neural training. The second block is the one most people skip when reading about high-performance morning routines, and the one whose effects most consistently surprise those who actually do it. It is the cold shower. 2 minutes of truly cold water. Not a quick cold splash at the end of a warm shower. A cold shower from the very first second. The neuroscience of cold water immersion is no longer speculative. Controlled studies document the following effects of even brief cold water exposure on the brain and body. A 250 to 300% increase in circulating norepinephrine, the neurotransmitter responsible for alertness, attention, and the focused energy that performance requires. There is also a significant increase in dopamine that lasts for 2 to 3 hours after exposure. Additionally, a reduction in inflammatory markers can be measured within an hour. Furthermore, a genuine documented boost to the resilience of the autonomic nervous system, which manages the stress response, builds with repeated exposures, leading to a measurably more stable neurological baseline. But beyond neuroscience, the cold shower does something no other 2-minute morning practice can. It shows every single morning, most immediately and viscerally, that you are bigger than your discomfort. That the body's preference urgently, loudly, and with full conviction telling you to step out of the cold water is not a necessity. It is a preference, and you are the one who decides which preferences control your behavior. This demonstration, performed every morning in the specific and unavoidable reality of the body's response to cold water, constructs something no amount of motivational speech can achieve: the embodied, experiential knowledge of your ability to overcome discomfort, to stay with the difficult challenge, to choose the hard path, not because it is easy, but because you have decided that choosing the hard path defines who you are. That knowledge, felt in the body rather than held as an intellectual position, is genuine mental armor. The first difficult moment of the workday, the hard conversation, the frustrating obstacle, the temptation to quit, arrives for someone who has already, this morning before 5:30 a.m., stood in cold water, every instinct urging them to escape, and stayed. That prior victory is not theoretical, it is in the body. It changes the relationship with difficulty before difficulty arrives. Block 3. The movement block building, the machine that runs the mind. The third block is movement, 25 minutes of vigorous physical exercise that raises the heart rate and keeps it elevated. It is specifically structured to produce neurological effects that distinguish the morning movement block from exercise at any other time of day. The morning exercise session, performed during the cortisol awakening response window, produces neurological effects that the afternoon gym session, however convenient, cannot match. Andrew Huberman and his team at Stanford have shown that morning exercise, especially activities involving forward movement, such as walking, running, cycling, and most cardio-based training, greatly amplifies the cortisol awakening response, accelerates the morning alertness transition, and delivers a noticeable boost to the dopaminergic and noradrenergic systems that regulate motivation, attention, and the quality of voluntary effort. The morning movement block is more than exercise. It is neural priming for the rest of the day. The exact format of the movement block is less important than its three essential features. First, it must raise the heart rate to at least 60% of its maximum, the point at which the most significant neurological benefits occur. Second, it must include an element of novelty or attentional demand, an exercise that requires focus rather than running on autopilot, because engaging attention enhances the neurological response. Third, it should end before exhaustion, at a point where more could be done. The morning movement block is not a session for maximum physical depletion, but a neurological warm-up designed to achieve the optimal activation state for the cognitive and psychological work that follows. Equally important is what the movement block excludes: screens. Music is allowed. The right music actually boosts the neurological benefits of morning exercise by increasing dopamine release. However, the podcast, the audiobook, and the news program, these are cognitive inputs that compete with the focused, internal awareness that makes the morning movement block a practice of mindful physical presence. Combining movement with media consumption only halves the benefits, since attention is divided between the physical activity and the audio content. Walk, run, move, and stay present in your body while doing it. The mind will get its inputs in the later blocks. The movement block belongs to the body. Block 4. Nourishment block fueling, the system that runs the day. The fourth block highlights something the performance-focused morning routine often completely neglects: the biological reality of the body that all this armor is meant to support. The nourishment block is not glamorous. It does not lend itself to inspiring language. But neglecting it or doing it poorly weakens every other part of the routine, because physiology is completely indifferent to motivation and intention. The post-exercise body has specific biological needs: protein for muscle recovery and neurotransmitter synthesis triggered by today's training. Complex carbohydrates for a steady glucose supply the brain needs to sustain the cognitive performance activated by today's activity. Hydration, the workout, has created a water deficit that, if not addressed, will lead to measurable cognitive decline within an hour. These are not optional, they are essential. And the person who bypasses the nourishment stage in favor of more journaling or reading is borrowing cognitive capacity, with a debt the body will settle before noon. The nourishment block has two dimensions: physical and psychological. On the physical side, the goal is simple: protein, complex carbohydrates, and water, in amounts suited to the person's size and the morning's exercise intensity. On the psychological side, the goal is equally vital and often overlooked: experiencing nourishment without distraction. Eating while reading, checking messages, or consuming information results in a meal that the body partly metabolizes, but the mind largely misses. Research on mindful eating consistently shows that the same meal, eaten with full attention rather than while multitasking, leads to different levels of fullness, metabolic responses, and psychological renewal that true nourishment offers. Eat the meal, be present with it, taste the food, drink the water. Let the 15 minutes of the nourishment period serve as a genuine transition, the physical settling after the movement block, and the physiological preparation for the upcoming cognitive blocks. The body is being cared for. The armor is worn by a machine that has been properly maintained. This is not indulgence, it is engineering. Block 5. Wisdom Block 1. Page that changes the day. Block 5 marks the shift from the physical to the explicitly philosophical, where the mental preparation for the day's specific psychological demands begins in earnest. It is the reading block, 30 minutes spent with a single text, chosen with deliberate care, that challenges the quality of thinking rather than confirming the quality of existing thinking. The wisdom block is based on a principle practiced by the greatest thinkers throughout history, that regular, intentional engagement with a mind more advanced than your own in a specific area is the most reliable way to accelerate your development in that area. Not reading for information, reading for connection. It's about the particular kind of intellectual engagement that occurs when you bring your full, rested, neurologically primed attention to a text that truly challenges and expands your current understanding. The choice of text is crucial. The wisdom block isn't meant for the news feed, social media summaries, or a business book that reaffirms what you already know and gives you a pleasant sense of productivity. It's for the challenging texts, those that require slow, careful reading, that reward rereading, and that, in an engaged reader, produce the specific friction that genuine intellectual challenge creates. The Stoic philosophers, the great biographies, the foundational texts of whatever field you are deeply working to master. The philosophy, history, or science that provides the broad context from which better daily decisions are made. Reading one page slowly and thoughtfully and annotating it with your thoughts is more valuable than reading 10 pages quickly for content. The measure of wisdom isn't in the number of pages read. It's in the quality of engagement with the ideas on the page and in the depth of thinking those ideas spark in the margins, in your journal, or during the brief, reflective pause that a truly challenging text requires. The 30 minutes of the wisdom block, practiced consistently over months and years, produces an effect that is hard to measure in a single morning, but becomes clear over the course of a year. The gradual yet real improvement in the quality of thinking. It's the slow buildup of frameworks, perspectives, and principles that lead to better judgment in the areas that matter most. The person who has read 50 pages of genuine wisdom each week for 5 years thinks differently, more precisely, more broadly, more originally than someone who hasn't. The armor that the wisdom block develops is the strongest and most transferable of all, the quality of thought from which all other decisions originate. Block 6, Clarity Block, Writing the Day Before It Writes You. Block 6 most clearly separates the pre-8 a.m. routine of the top performer from the morning routine of the well-meaning person who has not yet fully grasped what the morning is for. It is the journaling and planning segment, 30 minutes of intentional, written engagement with the day about to begin and the life being built one day at a time. The clarity block performs 3 functions, each crucial to the specific purpose of mental armor. The first function is cognitive offloading, transferring the working memory's contents to paper, freeing the prefrontal cortex for deliberate, future-oriented thinking. An unjournaled person's brain carries the weight of every unprocessed thought, unresolved concern, and pending decision from yesterday, the day before, and even earlier, through active background processing that constantly consumes prefrontal resources. Journaling empties this working memory, shifting the weight from active brain processing to passive storage on the page, and frees the cognitive capacity that background processing was using. After journaling, the brain feels lighter, sharper, and more ready for intentional planning for the day ahead. The second function is to cultivate genuine daily intention. Not the to-do list, the quality of person and engagement you aim to bring to the day's most important activities and interactions. The three most important things that, if achieved today, would truly make the day count. The quality of character, patience, focus, generosity, courage that you plan to bring to the specific challenges this day is likely to present. The single most important relationship that deserves your full presence today and what full presence looks like in practice. These intentions, expressed in specific language rather than as vague aspirations, have a neurological effect that unwritten intentions lack. Writing activates the hippocampus's encoding processes in a way that thought alone does not. The written intention becomes more deeply encoded and more reliably retrieved when needed than a thought intention held in working memory. The person who has written, "I will bring patience to the difficult conversation this afternoon," is genuinely more likely to access that intention during the difficult conversation than someone who only thought of it while still in bed. Writing is the hardware installation. Thought is merely the intent to install. The third function of the clarity block is the evening question preview, a brief, honest look at the question you will ask yourself tonight. Did the day I just lived reflect the person I intend to be? Not as a performance standard, but as a genuine, caring, and accountable inquiry into the quality of the life being built one day at a time. The person who previews this question in the morning tends to live the day slightly differently than the person who does not know the question is coming. The evening review becomes more honest, more useful, and more genuinely growth-producing when the morning has already set its terms. Block 7. The strategic block, the most important work. First, the seventh and final part of the pre-8 a.m. routine is what makes the previous 6 not only intellectually meaningful but also practically impactful. 40 minutes of deep, focused, uninterrupted work on your most important professional or creative project. This is the key difference that most clearly separates the pre-8 a.m. routine of a truly high-performing individual from a morning routine that feels productive yet remains preparatory. Blocks 1 through 6 focus on preparation. Excellent, neurologically sound, genuinely transformative preparation. Block 7 marks the purpose of this preparation. It's the hour when the fully activated, well-nourished, fully challenged, and intentionally focused brain engages with the work that matters most. Before the day's distractions begin, before the inbox opens, before the first interruption, and before the decision fatigue of the ordinary day depletes any of the executive resources this morning has carefully built and protected. The strategic block operates on a single core principle, derived from Cal Newport's productivity research and validated by Anders Ericsson's performance science. The work that yields the greatest long-term value in any field is the work that demands the deepest focus. This work cannot be done in the fragmented, interrupted, notification-driven conditions of a typical workday. It encompasses creative work, strategic thinking, and complex problem-solving, as well as the acts of writing, building, inventing, and analyzing that constitute the highest leverage activities in your specific professional or creative life. This work isn't accomplished during the regular workday, not because the day is too short, but because the usual conditions, interruptions, reactive demands, the cognitive load of an open email client, and phone notifications are inherently incompatible with the deep focus this work requires. Research consistently shows that knowledge workers who track their time spend less than 4 hours a week in true deep work, the kind that leads to breakthroughs, insights, creative leaps, and high-value outputs that justify their roles. The strategic block of time before 8 a.m. delivers the same amount of focused work in just 1 week of mornings. The rules of the strategic block are few and non-negotiable. The phone is absent. The email is closed. The door, physical or metaphorical, is closed. The single task is named in advance, in the clarity block, so no decision-making energy is wasted at the start of the block on what to work on. The timer is set for 40 minutes of uninterrupted work, followed by a short physical break before returning to the regular workday. Over weeks, months, and years of consistent morning practice, what happens in the strategic block is the most quietly extraordinary outcome of the entire Pre-8 a.m. routine. A body of work that grows in quality and volume at a pace that someone who hasn't built this practice cannot match, not because of greater talent or longer hours, but because of the daily investment of the brain's best resource into the work that most deserves it. The armor is not only for defense, it's for the advance. The morning builds the shield and the sword at the same time. The shield protects against the day's difficulty, and the sword advances the work that defines life. The strategic block is where preparation turns into production. It's where activation, nourishment, wisdom, and clarity converge on work that will outlast the morning. 40 minutes of truly deep work each weekday morning, before the world demands anything, yields approximately 3 hours and 20 minutes of the highest quality work possible in any given week. Over a year, that adds up to 170 hours of deep, focused, and fully resourced effort on your most important project in your professional or creative life. The person who has these hours and uses them wisely doesn't wonder why they fall behind those who seem to accomplish more. They understand exactly where the difference originates and know precisely how to close it. The complete routine at a glance. Block 1 activation, physiological sigh or cold water splash. No phone, nervous system primed. Block 2 thermal shock, 2-minute cold shower. Norepinephrine and dopamine surge. Comfort conquered before the first difficulty arrives. Block 3 movement, 25 minutes of elevated heart rate. The brain primed neurologically for the day's deepest work. Block 4 nourishment, protein, complex carbohydrates, and water. The body functions like the machine the mind operates. Block 5 wisdom, 30 minutes spent engaging with a truly challenging text, elevating the quality of thinking, 1 page at a time. Block 6 clarity journal, intentions for the day, the 3 most important things, a preview of the evening question. Block 7 strategic work, 40 minutes of deep, uninterrupted focus on the most important project, the sword alongside the shield. 3 hours, 7 blocks, every morning, before the world makes its first demand. Building it, the honest guide to installation. Here's the truth I need to share with you about this routine before you decide to build it. You will not build all 7 blocks at once on the first morning. The person who tries to set up this entire routine overnight is the one who keeps it for a week, only to give up when a missed morning leads to the all-or-nothing conclusion that the whole thing has failed. That's not how the most important routines in your life were built, and it's not how this one will be built either. The installation follows a clear, proven sequence. In the first week, focus on just one step, combining Block 1 and Block 2 activation and the cold shower. These 2 steps form the core of the routine. They establish the most crucial habit, waking up with purpose rather than checking the phone. Perfect these 2 steps for 7 straight days before adding anything else. 7 days isn't long, but the habit it creates is fundamental. In the second week, add Block 3, the movement. You now have 30 minutes of pre-dawn practice that is genuinely transforming your neurology. The effects are becoming noticeable. Your motivation to keep going is now partly intrinsic rather than solely effortful. In weeks 3 and 4, add blocks 4 and 5. In weeks 5 and 6, add block 6. In week 7, add block 7. By the end of 7 weeks, all 7 blocks are in place, not through a single bold decision made on a motivated Monday and abandoned by Wednesday. Instead, through the patient, step-by-step installation of each block, each one becomes a habit before the next is added. The most important rule during the installation period is never miss 2 mornings in a row. Missing one morning is just a pause. Missing 2 consecutive mornings signals the old pattern is starting again. The rule isn't about perfection. It's about preventing a single exception from becoming a new standard. Miss one morning, then come back the next day without judgment. The armor is rebuilt on the return, not by keeping the streak unbroken. 7 blocks, 3 hours, every morning before the world arrives. I want to end with the most important truth I can share with you about this practice, not as a source of inspiration, but as an honest evaluation of what it does to a life over time. The pre-8 a.m. routine doesn't make the day any easier. The days remain tough. The obstacles are still real. The tough conversations still happen. Frustrating problems still arise. And the uncertainty and setbacks, along with the hard, unglamorous work of building something truly worthwhile, none of that is removed by 3 hours of intentional morning practice. What changes is who meets all of that. The person who has activated their nervous system, conquered their comfort, moved their body, nourished their machine, read something that expanded their thinking, written their intentions, and done 40 minutes of deep work on what matters most. That person faces the first difficult moment of the workday as someone who has already won the first battle, and, before the day has made a single demand, has proven to themselves that they are the person who does the hard thing before the easy thing, who chooses deliberately before the world chooses for them, who builds armor before they need it. And that person, the one who has faced the morning on their own terms, consistently, for weeks, months, and years, does not need to be the most talented. They don't need perfect circumstances, the ideal situation, or luck at the right moment. They need what they have already built, the daily, patient, completely reliable practice of preparing more thoroughly than the day they are about to face. The armor, forged every morning, is a defense against everything the day will bring. Tomorrow morning, you start. Not with all 7 blocks, but with 2, activation and cold water, 5 minutes and 2 minutes, 7 minutes of your morning that are truly yours before the world arrives. 7 minutes when you are already ahead. These 7 minutes are the first layer of armor and the foundation of everything that follows. The top 1% isn't an exclusive group of people born exceptional or fortunate. Instead, it consists of ordinary individuals who achieve extraordinary success through a dedicated, daily practice that is entirely learnable. This practice involves taking control of the morning before it controls you, helping you develop mental, physical, and psychological resilience that distinguishes those who shape their day from those passively influenced by it. Everyone who reaches the level you're aspiring to started with a single morning making the choice to wake up before the world, using those hours for purpose rather than just waiting for the alarm. That choice is possible for you tomorrow. Just set your alarm earlier, get up when it rings, and resist reaching for your phone. Instead, reach for your armor. You have the power to build it. The morning eagerly awaits. Set the alarm. Own the morning. The day belongs to whoever claims it first.